the norm isn't necessarily the norm anymore.
Right.
Okay, so now we got a clean slate. What are we going to do? What are we going to build? How are we going to build it? What are we going to, and so that to me is, as a dreamer, that's great. I love
I
that
love
stuff.
it. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for swinging by and checking out TLC Presents Todd-versations. We are really, really thrilled with our guest today. Please, everybody, give it up for Mark Freeman, Head of Global Food at LinkedIn. Welcome, Mark.
Hey, how's it going, Todd?
Doing good today. I'm thrilled that you're here joining me. I'm really excited. I say all the time, I compare my excitement to a lot of different things. And this I'm going to put there right up there with the spider monkey, on Mountain Dew as far as my excitement level goes, because I think this is going to be a fabulous conversation. I'm getting to know you a little bit and getting into your background and who you are. I feel like we're going to have a conversation about some pretty cool stuff today. So I've got a laundry list of questions, and I'm going to put you on the spot, and we're going to rock and roll and have fun. So again, welcome and appreciate you being here.
Sure. Glad to be here, man.
Cool. All right, you ready to go, man? I'm going to fire him up.
Let's do
it. So give us a little bit of your background. You're the head of global food at LinkedIn. So share your background and kind of how you got to where you are today.
Yeah. Thanks for that. And I'll maybe take you through a little bit of my journey, right? So
absolutely.
I started way back when I was in high school, washing dishes, right? A lot of people in our industry do that, right? But I got this food bug in my blood, and managed restaurants for a few years. Got into, I don't know, healthy food. I worked in a health food restaurant again when I was in college and that sort of thing, and went to Washington State University in the hotel and restaurant program.
Go Cougars.
And spent some time there, and then kind of an interesting thing happened is that I decided I was going to get rich making pizzas, right? So I dropped out of school, went to a pizza place. I was going to be a manager, going to be a district manager. I was going to own the company, blah, blah, blah. Well, that never happened, right? So I went back to school and finished my degree at the Evergreen State College in Olympia. Go Gooey Ducks.
Go.
And,
not the most popular mascot, by the way. Right up there with banana slugs. It's just not right there in the most popular choices.
Yeah, but just like what happens with pretty much all college kids, it's like, oh crap, I graduated. Now what am I going to do, right? So yeah. I actually went down to the college food service, and because food is what I know and what I liked and whatnot, so I ended up going with a company called Saga Food Service, a contractor, and spent, I don't know, probably 20 years feeding college kids, right? So I bounced all over the U.S., different locations. Here, I'm based out of Seattle, so I spent some time in Washington, in Seattle, in Salt Lake, and in kind of different places. Billings, Montana got me around. But anyway, feeding college kids. And then, as life happens, you decide that you maybe don't want to work the 18-hour days and that sort of thing. And so I looked at corporate food service, and so I thought, wow, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, no nights, no weekends, home on Mother's Day, all that kind of stuff. And so I jumped to the corporate world and fed corporate America, American Express, bounced around a little bit. And then ended up in Corvallis, Oregon, at Hewlett Packard. And
Beavs.
Yeah, there you go. And so, I was feeding the people, a plant of about 7,000 people, I guess, in Corvallis. And then they said, why don't you jump ship and become an HP employee instead of a contractor? And I said, oh, okay, let's try this. I don't have to deal with cashiers not showing up for work or chefs throwing knives and, all the things that happen. And so I jumped ship, joined HP as a client, got into the kind of global space with HP. So I got to travel the world a little bit, and then left HP, went to a small kind of a consulting firm out of Baltimore, for a little while, again, kind of back into the college world, realized that consulting is not my gig. And then, this dream job came up at Microsoft. And so I went to Microsoft as the head of global food. And it was one of those things where I walked in the door and I thought, God, this is, one of the premier jobs in the industry, and I'll just put my feet on the desk and kind of sit back and watch this thing happen, right? Well, it wasn't like that. We were in huge growth mode. We were,
Sure.
there were a lot of things going on. And so I spent probably the first couple of years just kind of getting things straightened out, and really working on the program. And then after that, we got into all the fun stuff, and I'm sure that we'll talk about a little bit of that here coming up. But anyway, spent 13 years at Microsoft, and then, I had this kind of bug about retiring. And so I said, okay, let's retire. And I was retired for about 4 hours before then I jumped over to Ford Motor Company. And Ford was kind of an interesting place because we did some, the auto industry is kind of becoming a digital company, if you will. And because everything is digital. And so they were looking about how to attract and retain the best and the brightest digital worker into their organization. And food is one of those things that you do with that, right? So I went to Ford for a couple of years. The COVID hit and kind of everything in the auto industry and every place else shut down. And so I thought, well, maybe it's time to retire again, right? So okay, I did, right? And this time I actually retired for, I don't know, probably 2 months. And I think I really don't understand the concept of retirement, because I love working. I love the industry. I love what I'm doing. And so this job at LinkedIn came up, and I thought, well, I'll give it a shot. It's my comfort zone. It's what I like. It's what I enjoy doing. And so, I've been at LinkedIn for now, probably, I don't know, 3 months, 4 months, something like that. Just kind of getting past the acronyms and meeting people and face-to-face and, all the things that go along with that. So that's a bit, kind of a small bit of my journey, but it's been a fun one, right?
Well, no, yeah. Well, no, well, it's one of the things you said I thought that was really cool is that this space, this idea, this, going down the trail of the food world hit you very, very early. Your path was kind of thrown in front of you and you leaned into it. Sorry about the pizza thing didn't work out, but I'm guessing that might've been a 50-50 anyways.
I think it worked out okay.
Yeah. I think when you have a trajectory that uses the word district manager as a leaping board, I don't know, maybe that's going to slow you down a touch. But but to have that inspiration carry you through and drive those decision forwards, obviously it's put you in the position that you are today. And retiring and unretiring has put you in the position that you are today. And you're right, you're not really good at retiring. I'm not trying to be critical, but you're 0 for 2, I think, in the concept of retirement.
I think I'm done retiring.
Well, just kind of briefly, what is your responsibility as head of global food like you are now with LinkedIn?
Yeah, so again, it's a global position. LinkedIn has sites all over the world. Majority of it, I think, well, actually, they work out to be about, I don't know, 13 or 14 sites in all regions. So we have, the U.S. obviously, what we call America, and then we have APAC, which again, there's I think about 12 or 13 sites there, and then in EMEA, Europe, Asia, or Europe, that we've got again another bunch of locations there. And LinkedIn is I mean, the food program is phenomenal. It happens to be 100% subsidized, and so we put food in every one of our locations, every one of our offices. We have some sort of food options, and in some places there's a small number of people, and we may just do snacks and bring food in. Other locations like the South Bay, we have a headquarters and we have multiple cafes and catering and everything that kind of events and things that go along with the food program there. So I don't know, we're serving, probably before COVID, we were serving 8 to 10 million meals annually, and again, we got 30 locations across the world. So, and we're growing, right? I mean, and so
For sure.
there's different pieces of that coming up in the way of design and construction of buildings and cafes in the buildings or food locations in the buildings. And so I get involved a lot in the design and construction world, as well as contracts. So we contract with food service providers. There's no LinkedIn employees that theoretically feed our employees. It's all contracted out. So I deal a lot with global and regional contracts to make sure that we have the right provider in the right location and have the best food on the planet for our employees. So so I mean it's a comprehensive job. And like I said, right now I'm also working on designing strategies to take this thing into the future and understand what our growth pattern is going to be and really kind of play in that space. And like I say, I'm just getting past the acronym stage and getting to know people and putting faces with names and who I need to understand deeper and who I'm just trying to be a part of. So.
Well, yeah. Well, you get in the acronym space. I mean, I always talk about acronym Scrabble, right? You get especially in the government acronym. It's crazy. What? Yeah. Thinking about Mark, the future pizza entrepreneur, and then thinking about Mark today, and working with global companies like Microsoft and Ford, and I'm sure probably Microsoft helped you inside of LinkedIn a little bit because you there's that similarity there. And so thinking about Microsoft, Ford, and LinkedIn, how has Pizza Mark been shaped by Global Mark as far as what your thinking was back then? Because that belief system's still got to be in your heart, right? It's still got to believe that's still that young guy that was looking at pizza still's got to be inside you coming out today in some ways. So how has it shaped you or fostered your ideas?
This episode of Todd-versations is brought to you by the Organic Grower Summit. Join us December 1st and 2nd in beautiful Monterey, California. Organic Grower Summit, connecting organic growers and producers with supply chain and service providers. Learn more at organicgrowersummit.com.
Yeah, again, I think as when you're young and building a career, you're worried, you're focused on your skill set and, kind of what you got in your bag of tricks, what I call bag of tricks, right? But as you progress through your career, you start to, gain what I consider to be wisdom, if you will, and how things happen and how they don't happen. And, in any career, you have your ups and downs, and kind of the way that I look at it is that, when you have something that, maybe doesn't go the way you wanted it to go, you take that as a learning because you're going to use it in your future, right? And so now I'm at that point where I'm using that wisdom, if you will, to be able to start to understand how things work and how we can better improve and how can we maneuver, the workspace. And I still have that passion for food. It is as we were, kind of talking earlier with regard to the excitement of this industry, it never stops, right? I mean, you're in the day and things happen and then you go to the next day and it's never the same as what you were doing and it's never the same as what you were doing in the past, right? So it's exciting, it's changing, it's always changing. I like change, and again at Microsoft and Ford too. Ford was going through a huge change and it's just a constant. And so I really kind of got interested in change and understanding change and how you deal with change, right? But because, when you make decisions in some companies, you think that a decision is going to be for the next 30 years. And I learned really fast at Microsoft that it wasn't. And they have what they call the growth mentality there. And it's about making decisions fast, maybe with not all of the data that you think you're going to need, and testing it. And I kind of put you're jumping out of an airplane and figuring out the parachute on the way down, right? But that's the exciting part. It's exciting. You get a rush, and then you either hit it or you fail. And if you fail fast and move on. Just go to the next change, go to the next change, go to the next change. And for me, I mean, that's a lot of that is the food industry, right? When I was working in the
Right.
kitchen, it was always, oh my God, we're out of coffee, or the dishes are piling up. Who's going to do that? I mean, there's always this energy that seems to go, and that kind of stuff really, really drives me. And I'm, like I say, I can't seem to retire, so it's going to drive me forever, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, you could try going. I mean, it'd be really awful to go over 3 on retirement. I think if you're going to get into the third one, you got to stick to it. You got to get committed. You said something about, and I love that expression about jumping out of plane and figuring out the parachute on the way down. Right. Again, another expression somebody's taught me is like, people try to boil the ocean instead of a cup of water. Right.
Yeah.
So real quickly, you're in this role, you're working from home because the world's basically shut down. COVID hits. It's got to be it has to be some level of frustration. It has to be a little bit crazy. You're trying to figure it out. And you're not trying to figure out like a location down the block. You're figuring out a global strategy and what's going on around. Because what do you think? What do you have, like 31 or whatever the number is, global cafeterias and global food outlets around the world? I mean, it's nuts. So how is that for you? Especially because, you're a food guy, so you're hands-on, right? I mean, anybody in the food business is pretty much hands-on. I think it's part of the DNA. So how was that for you dealing with that?
Well, again, I kind of take it back to Microsoft a little bit. And
yeah,
when I was working at Microsoft, I spent, I don't know, maybe 3 days a week at the facilities, right? And again, they're all global jobs. So, pretty much you're on an airplane, in a hotel, and then you're in a cafe, right? And I get my energy from being in the cafe. I just like to sit there and kind of watch what customers do. They smile, they don't smile. You kind of get a feel for what they're up to, and so that's my energy space. And so you're right. When COVID hit, it was 100% here, and I couldn't travel. I couldn't get out and do around, and I wasn't that familiar with, Zoom and Teams and all these other things, right? But you get used to it, and you get to kind of start to figure it out. And again, to me, it's not the best way to manage. And fortunately, in the past couple of weeks, I was able to travel for the first time in 17 months or whatever it was, and it was amazing for me just to see to get back in the energy of the cafe, understand what's going on. And again, look at people. I watch people a lot because they tell you a lot, and they if you talk to them, they will share anything and everything about the food. People are passionate about food, and everybody's got an opinion, right? So you try and play to that. And so it's been good to get back out. And again, I'm going to be traveling in another couple of weeks, and so that's going to be good. And then, of course, hopefully the world will open up, and then I'll be able to go see some of the sites in Dublin or Singapore or Beijing or wherever those kinds of places get to open up. But yeah, it's a bit of a challenge, but it's just like everything else. You work through it and you figure it out. It's just another one of those kind of hurdles that you look at and get figured out.
Well, yeah, and there's no doubt. It certainly is. There's no playbook for what we're dealing with right now. And being somebody that traveled tremendously in 2020, I think about it that I flew 75,000 miles and spent 70 hotel nights in 2020. Never got sick, but it's a different world out there in the travel space. Very lucky. It's a different world out there in the travel space. Yeah. There's no doubt. So when you're just briefly a little bit, just to kind of a frame up of people's understanding, there's got to be a lot of boxes that you need to check off when it comes to scaling dining like you do and working in that corporate world, whether it's taste or it's visual, things like that. How much does that play into some of your thinking? And I know you're a big science behind the meal guy. And I know I'm going to get into that with you in a little bit. I got a whole series of questions for those, but how much does that really play into making those decisions for your, what do you call people that dine? I want to say it the right way. Are they your clients? Are they your customers? What do you call people that are inside? Yeah,
my customers, the end user, the employee. Yeah, I talked about it a little bit earlier. It's this idea of listening to what they're up to and trying to understand what they're doing. I'm deeply involved in the industry as a whole, and so sure. I reach out to colleagues and try and understand what's the next greatest thing. And to be honest with you, I pay a lot of attention to the college and university world. I lived there for a while, and I understand it, but I have a lot of colleagues that are in that world. And those students that are there are going to be my customers in 4 years or less, right? And
Sure.
so I need to understand what it is they're up to, and so that I can, and I tease them all the time. I don't want to just meet what they're doing in the college and universities. I want to exceed it. I want to be better than what the college and universities are doing. And so you can't do that unless you pay attention to what's going on there. So yeah, I mean, it's just listening and kind of keeping tabs on what's going on. I mean, in a couple of other instances, I'm now connected to the hospital world. I mean, during COVID, I was at Ford, and the hospital world was kicking on all cylinders because that's where all the action was, right? And so,
Right.
so I started to pay attention to what was going on there. And I mean, one of the things that we brought into Ford, which was never heard of before, was groceries, right? We put groceries in the facility in one of our buildings because the workers there who, the essential workers that had to come to work they were afraid to go to the grocery store.
Yeah.
And so we put some groceries in, and that's exactly what the hospital world was doing at the time, because they had the same problem, right? So, I reach out into the industry and stay tuned to the industry because, that's the world, right? And there's some great ideas of things that are going on in the industry when you start to pay attention and talk to your colleagues and
Right.
all that. So yeah, I mean, I guess that's the kind of the crux of that, right?
Yeah. Well, no. Well, look, you're feeding a diverse group of people because you have a global audience every day, and you have an audience, right? So how do you deal with kind of those eating habits or those practices? Because I mean, you have religious food restrictions, probably. You have allergy people. You have regional tastes.
Yeah.
How do you how do you kind of balance that?
Yeah, well, and again, as I said earlier, I do all this through the help of our providers, right? So we have the Compasses and the Airmarks and the Sodexos that are out there, and I rely on them a lot to handle the kind of nuances of that. But again, it's interesting because I keep coming back to the customer. I want to listen to the customer, right? And it was interesting because obviously, my generation, the boomer generation, I look through my boomer eyes and I see things, and it doesn't necessarily match the Gen X, Gen Z, Gen Y kind of a group, right? Or the millennials, right? And so I realized this kind of early on at Microsoft, and I thought, how can I make decisions without including that group of people in there? And so I created this kind of focus group with millennials, and our team would go in and kind of pitch what we were thinking about, and see what their reaction was. Get their feedback, get their input, right? And in the first few meetings, everything was pretty quiet, and they were kind of nervous about this old guy in the room and what's he thinking and all this kind of stuff, right? But as we got deeper into it, they really opened up and they started to share some things that, kind of, why are you doing it this way? Or what's up with this? Or what's up with that? Right. And so we started to shift our program. And I mean, a classic example of that was, the millennials and pretty much everybody now is concerned about the planet. They are totally concerned about the planet. And so, we started to explore that a little bit. And one of the things that we explored, I said, okay, so what is it? What food do you want to see on our menu, right? And they kind of got in the corner and they talked about it a little bit, and they came back and they said, well, we think that insects or crickets might be an option, right? And interestingly enough, at our baseball stadium, they had put in this menu item of crickets, and I get it when you're, 6 beers in and watching a baseball game, you go eat crickets, but I couldn't see it on our menu.
I'm going to say it's more than 6.
Yeah. Well, but what happened is that I said, okay, let's test this, let's try this a little bit and see what happens, right? And so they initiated this day that we would go into the dining room and we would walk around in our dining room and have these little cups of crickets to be able to, test or try. And it was volunteer. I mean, we just put them in front and said, hey, you like to try crickets? Yeah. It was phenomenal what happened, right? And again, I say I like to watch the customer, but what happened is that all the boomers stepped back. They go, oh my God, what are you doing to my food program? Blah, 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 right? All the millennials leaned in, right? Yeah. And they said, yeah, I want to do this. And not only did they lean in, but they got on their phones and they told their friends upstairs they're serving crickets in the dining room. And we had this mass of people come down because of what we were doing. Yeah. And the reason that it was important to them is because a cricket only absorbs the water from the food that it eats. So there's no impact on the planet from a water standpoint that a cow, a chicken, or a pig would have, right? Right. And so that was their initiative, and that's the way they were promoting it. And again, it was all about, saving the planet. And so that's what was attractive. Now, I was still a little nervous about putting those on the menu, but and again, as I was kind of phasing out of Microsoft, they were talking about what they were doing. So I'm not sure they're still there, but it was interesting for me just to, again, listen to that age group. And, I took that to Ford and got them engaged and started to learn more about that and doing the same thing at LinkedIn. I mean, it's young people and they're curious. They have initiatives that they're very, very concerned about. And so if I can meet those needs, or if I can, enhance what it is that they're caring about, then yeah, let's go for it. So, it involves food, but it's also this kind of social thing that's starting to develop that sure. We definitely got to pay attention to. The sustainability initiative is huge, and it was at Microsoft, it was at Ford, and it also here at LinkedIn, and that takes you into some really wild places with regard to growing and all kinds of things, right, with sustainability and again, during the COVID piece of it, we struggled with packaging. The sustainability thing kind of took a back seat for a little while, but it was still there. And now, the sustainability thing is back. We're not using recyclable or compostable containers anymore. We're using plates, so we can reuse them. And so those are the kinds of things that we're, really kind of focused in on right now.
I love it. Well, in all fairness, crickets aren't bad. They're really not.
I still didn't get there.
I know, but they're really not. I mean, people, to your point, it's like I can see people leaning out and some people leaning in, but there's worse things. You're not going to open up a $200 bottle of wine and eat crickets, but nonetheless, but maybe you do open up a big bottle of wine. I don't know. You know what? I'm going to retract that statement and say, let's go find out. I'll come up. We'll do crickets. I'll bring the wine. You do the crickets. I'm done. But I love what you said, and I think this is such an important point that corporate America and people need to start to embrace, is that this generation coming up is all about the planet in a lot of ways and making conscientious choices. And one of those things I think is really, really important about that too, is when we start getting into, and I'm going to drive us into some sustainability and technology after this one, but is locally sourced food, right? We know the data supports that people that support local food drive a better economy into their local system. Yeah. Food miles. I mean, we all the buzzwords we can put to that. How's local food impacted you, and does it impact some of your thinking about what you're doing in the future?
Yeah, we're all about local food. From a produce standpoint, if you will, and a supply chain piece of it, but also local restaurants and local establishments, if you will. A couple things on that is that I think COVID opened up a lot of people's eyes about local, and some of the initiatives that we're thinking about is how we can support the local restaurants and how we can support the local farmers. But prior to COVID, brought in a lot of things at Microsoft kind of before their time.
Right.
The local initiatives, and also, these, I don't know, undesirable produce that is not, sellable in a grocery store, if you will, or something like that.
Right.
We were kind of spearheading that whole thing, and we had some fun with that. But yeah, I mean, the I think I lost my train of thought. Sorry.
Well, no, just about the local side of things,
Oh, yeah.
sourcing locally and
So
being in the moment. Yeah.
yeah, so we deeply got into it. We started to really focus on the local farms, the local farmers, and that sort of thing. And it didn't always play well with our suppliers. Our suppliers, wanted to, deal with the large farms and that sort of thing. And so it was a bit of a twist with them to get over that, if you will, and be able to start to support the local farmers. And so we looked at a lot of different things, and totally got into it. Again, at Microsoft, we were, as you might imagine, trying to digitize everything and trying to put digital things into everything. And so we were talking to farmers about how they could better their produce, and how we could how we could kind of work with them to be able to support their industries, if you will. And it took us into a lot of different places. And we may get into this later, but one of the initiatives that we had at Microsoft was to reduce. It really was a method to reduce food waste, right? But we started to get into predictive analytics, and so we were taking the data off of our cash registers, putting it with a Microsoft product called Power BI and Azure in the cloud. We were putting all this data in, and then we started to pull different data sources. So we pulled weather, and we pulled traffic, and we pulled moon phases, and we pulled all these kinds of different data sources into this algorithm, if you will, and it started to pump out some really cool information. One was, we could start to predict, based on the conditions, if you will, of how many people would come into our cafe tomorrow, right? And again, this is all around food waste. So if we could predict, and we were predicting, within, 96% accuracy rate, how many people would come into our cafe tomorrow. And we were getting it to a point where we could predict what they were going to eat. And so then we would prepare the food that we knew people were going to consume. And we took that then, 30 days out, we could predict within a 94% accuracy rate. 6 months out, we could start to predict how many tomatoes we were going to need in 6 months, or how many, so we started to then start to play with the growers and understand that we could guarantee them that we were going to buy their tomatoes or whatever it was, because we knew we were going to sell them on a particular day, right? And so then the farmer could plant for us what we wanted and what we needed, or, again, it gets really complicated, but those are the kinds of things that we were trying to do with the supply chain, if you will, to understand it. And, and again, I was working with a team at Microsoft that eventually it became a product of Microsoft. Microsoft has a product now called FarmBeats. And FarmBeats is putting IoT devices out into a field to be able to track data, land data, weather data, plant data, all that sorts of things.
Right.
And it's in a farm situation, it's hard to transmit data over distances, right? And so the FarmBeats team actually worked out some really cool technology to be able to transmit data on a TV band spectrum of data shipping, if you will. And now they're starting to implement this and starting to get this data off of the farm and the air and whatever else, to be able to help the farmers. And the farmers now can monitor their farm actually on a phone if they need to, or on a Surface tablet, right? And then the farm starts telling you things because of the data that they're collecting off of these sensors that are out there. So that's I guess a bit of kind of deep dive into what the kind of stuff that I was getting into. And I know, I think, you know, we're probably going to get into the bison thing, but maybe now's the time to do it, because what happened was is that with all this data collection that was happening in the fields, I actually kind of connected with the National Bison Association, because a bison is a roaming animal. And what we were interested in is tracking the bison to help the bison ranchers, if you will. And so, you know, I went to, I and a couple of data scientists. It wasn't me really. I was just kind of the food guy, but a lot of smart people went along, and we did a presentation at the National Bison Association, and started to talk a little bit about how we could help them manage their herds, because a bison, again, it's a roaming animal. Anytime you bring them together, they're very nervous. Their adrenaline goes up, and so anytime you can not have to bring them together or not have to herd them, they're more comfortable. And so we were working with them to try and be able to do that. And then, you know, of course, the bison ranchers, they were kind of playing with us a little bit, but what they said, you know, is the best way that you could really understand the bison is to own one, right? And so at the end of the conference, we went to the bison auction, and you know, and it was funny because I was the guy from Microsoft sitting in the crowd, and everybody kind of knew that I was the Microsoft guy. And so when it came to raising paddles, everybody stopped raising their paddles, and I ended up getting a couple bison, right? So
we got Buffy and Lola.
Buffy and Lola are in Colorado. I'm an absentee owner. I've got a rancher there that takes care of them. And I'm a proud grandpa now that Buffy and Lola have had babies, and you know, we're growing the herd, right? But anyway, it's kind of funny how that all goes. And again, I'm concerned, just like the millennials, about the planet. And so Buffy and Lola are part of a land management group called the Savory Institute. And so they're out trying to, you know, make sure that land management is being taken care of, and the bison are moving in the pastures the way they should, and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, it's kind of a fun thing to do. But anyway, it's you know, that unique but to me, it's all about just, you know, kind of listening and understanding, and be curious about your career and what you're doing in your career. Because it'll take you in just a whole bunch of different directions, right?
Well, we never know what our path is, right? I say it all the time. We walk on a path, and we choose certain days to go left, certain days to go right, certain days we question our path. We wonder why this is happening. But the most important thing is that we keep going down that path, because you just don't know what that next step is going to bring you. Exactly. I love the fact that you know, you really exemplified, I think, what maybe a lot of people sit there and go, oh, what does data really mean? And you've really framed it up, you know, specifically around working with farmers, how important data has become. The more we understand, the more we can make positive changes. You know, whether we're working to save the planet, whether we're working to make better food, whether we're making a widget, right? Data is such an important part of what we're doing. And I know that data is a major part of sustainability and that technology that's around there. And one of the things that I thought was really, really cool that you've done, and I'd like for you to share a little bit, you know, specifically using, you know, how we've applied, you know, sustainability and technology together, but how have you applied that in the work you're doing? But one of the areas I thought was really cool that you're looking at is how to apply technology directly to your customers on a daily basis. And one of the ones I want to talk about, or you can kind of share a little bit, is your Bluetooth beacon concept that you're working on. And I'd like to, you know, lean into that one. I have another question in regards to that as well, but I'll let you first tell everybody what that means.
Yeah, so just for everybody, Bluetooth beacons are these little IoT devices that we put them as people were entering the cafe, and also under the counter of the cafe. And what it does is that it's a voluntary thing. You sign up for an app, and then when you walk into a cafe, Bluetooth hits your phone and tells you things, right? We were working with a small startup out of the Bay Area at the time that was doing some things with menus, and they, you know, they had doctors and, you know, a lot of nutritionists and whatever, and they would figure out a menu plan for you personally, right? And then we would put menu items out onto our counters, and people would walk through the door, and the Bluetooth beacon would hit your phone and say, have the salad bar today, don't go to the French fries. So there was this mental thing that was going on with the Bluetooth beacon. Now, what we did is we took that a bit of a step further, which we always did, was when you walked up to the counter, a Bluetooth beacon would hit your phone and it would tell you, maybe it was a salmon dinner, it would tell you the calories, the carbs, the proteins, the salt, the whatever, and a lot of information about that food. But the other thing that it would do was there was a link, if you will, to a video. And the video would be of a chef who's right across the table from you, helping harvest the salmon that you're actually eating on the counter, that you're picking up on the counter. The customer in our case really wanted to know the transparency of the food, where it came from, how it was raised, on that sort of thing. And so we played to that. And so, every year there's a salmon hatchery it's live salmon, it's fresh, a wild salmon. And we would go up there and they would harvest the salmon, and we would have our chefs actually help harvest the salmon, right? And and it was a great program. But then again, what it did is it really started to connect the customer with the food and understand the food. So we use data in that sense to be able to, to educate. And for me, data is and it's becoming more and more and more this idea of, it's kind of a behind the scenes thing that's happening that gives you value in the moment, right? I mean, Amazon to me is phenomenal at this. Every time I order something from Amazon, it shows up on Facebook, or they're telling me that, these many people bought the same product and I should buy it. And, all this kind of stuff that happens in the background, but it becomes of value to me, right? And so to me, data needs to happen, if you will, in the background around those kinds of things, so that Alexa, turn on the TV or whatever. It's those kinds of things that I really started to focus in on, and how we do that with food, right? So those are the kinds of things that we're thinking about. And again, I think there's a lot of ways to go with data and being able to support a food program.
For sure.
We were thinking, well, we weren't thinking, we were putting in infrastructure to be able to do things with heat maps. So in a corporate cafeteria, it seems like everybody comes down at noon and wants to eat, right? And so what we were doing is heat maps on the phone. So a customer, an employee could see, oh, okay, it's really busy at the grill, or it's really busy at the salad bar, it's really busy at the Indian station. And so maybe I'll wait 15 minutes before it comes, before it starts to clear out or whatever. Or it's saying, they must really have something great at the Indian station today. I better get down there and get it, right? I mean, but it's data. It's data that helps support decision making when it comes to food, right? So those are some of the things that we were kind of getting into.
Well, and it's fascinating to me because I think that this, what you just shared is something that I believe is going to be the future of retail in a lot of ways, because people want to know. And one of the things that you've done that I think is super, super cool is that you've got TV screens up where you're actually sharing and talking about the carbon footprint of what's going on. Back to the generation who wants to know what's going on to the planet. I mean, you can get down to that level of really saying, hey, this salmon here's the carbon footprint for the salmon. Here's what it is. So people, because the only way I think we're going to make a lot of changes in this world at this point on issues is by voting with our dollars, right? And voting with a little bit of conscience. So that's something I think is really, really cool. And so if I'm correct, you've got these TV monitors up that are actually educating people throughout the dining process.
This episode of Todd-versations is brought to you by the Organic Grower Summit. Join us December 1st and 2nd in beautiful Monterey, California. Organic Grower Summit, connecting organic growers and producers with supply chain and service providers. Learn more at organicgrowersummit.com.
Yeah, we're not quite there yet, but again, that's a bit of a dream, and I think it's a dream I've seen it. It's very possible. I had the opportunity in 2015 to go to the World Expo in Milan, and the World Expo at that point in time was based on feeding the world in 2050, when there's going to be 10 billion people on the planet, And the USA Pavilion, which I actually got an opportunity to speak at, was displaying food growing on the side of a wall, and the food would turn towards the sun, right? So get more sun and all that sort of thing, right? But one of the cool things that I really got to see there was this, and it was being proposed as a grocery store of the future, right? But it was just what you were talking about. I walked in. And when you walk in, the store knows you. The store knows whether you're a buyer or you're a looker, because it's tapping into your buying habits, maybe on your phone or something. Again, data. It's a little bit scary about what's going on there, and it was in its infancy in 2015, but it's obviously developed more than that now. But anyway, I would walk down these grocery store aisles, and I'd touch a bottle of wine, and up on the screen would pop the whole story about the wine, including the carbon footprint and how far away it was and all these kinds of things, right? And it was really interesting, because if I was a buyer and I touched that wine, a human would come over and engage with me and tell me even more of the story, right? So now the store was interacting with the humans to be able to sell things to me. Those are the kinds of things that I picked up, at that, and it was a world of learning that's going on at that World Expo. I picked up a ton of stuff that I could bring back, right? And it's still in my head, right? But anyway, that was one of the things that really struck me. And now with the positions that I've had, to be able to start to incorporate that into what we're doing, and carbon footprint, and it's starting to get easier or more I don't know, figured out, if you will. But
I think they're explaining it better now.
Well, but it's hard because you if we buy a tomato from California, or we buy a tomato from Chile, or we buy a tomato from Washington, it has a different footprint, right?
Correct.
And sometimes when you're trying to tell the customer what the carbon footprint is, you're constantly changing, because the supply chain is different in different times of the seasons, right? And so again, I've been kind of thinking about that and trying to work with that. We're I pitched this idea at Microsoft, I pitched it at Ford, and I'm pitching it now at LinkedIn, is having our own greenhouse, right? So now we know the carbon footprint of that tomato, because we're growing it and it's right outside, and the carbon footprint is feet instead of thousands of miles, right? And so those are the kinds of things that I've been thinking about, and being able to do that, and then also, I guess, understand what greenhouses can do, and how you can infuse data into them, and how robotics are starting to work. And again, I think you spent some time in the Netherlands. I also spent some time in the Netherlands, and they got it figured out. They're doing some really cool stuff over there. And I was actually with Microsoft, we were working, we have data centers over there, and data centers put off a lot of heat as a waste, right? And so I was saying, okay, what can we do with this heat, right? Well, right across the street from our data center was a greenhouse. So why not pump the air into the hot air into the greenhouse, and now reuse it again, if you will. And then I got to thinking, okay, when you're generating electricity, what's a waste? A waste is CO2, right? So now plants love CO2. So why not take the CO2 off the data center and pump it in there? Now, humans work in those greenhouses, and so humans and CO2 don't necessarily get along. And so now you think about robotics and putting robots into those greenhouses, and so it just kind of starts to play as you try and start to figure this out. But it really all has to do with, to me, the carbon footprint and reducing the carbon footprint of what's going on, right? So again, those are the kinds of things that we can, to me, we can really start to energize and think about, right?
Well, yeah. And one of the questions I was going to ask you, you're leading me right into it, is about bringing food closer to the kitchen. And, with the advancements of technology that you're seeing out here today, whether it's vertical farming, advancements in greenhouses, food is literally coming to food deserts now. There's greenhouses outside of the city of Dubai where they're producing fresh fruits and, fresh fruits and vegetables out of these facilities, which they never could do before.
Right.
It's just not a climate that's going to be able to work. But to be able to bring food to the people that's fresh, that's not on a plane, not on a boat. My travels in Dubai, I'm seeing labels from people in Los Angeles on the shelves in Dubai. And while I understand that business model is there and it's important, it's not necessarily going to be in the best interest long term in a lot of ways. So tell me a little bit more, if you will, about your belief in alternative growing practices and how you feel about greenhouses and some of this technology. I mean, I know you're a tech guy, you love the data, you love all this. It's got to be right in your wheelhouse. What are you seeing out there that excites you?
Well, yeah. Oh, yeah. You're stepping into my world now. I mean, it's like I said, when I was wherever I am, I like to understand what the customer's doing and listening to them, right? And so when I was at Microsoft, one of the things that the customer kept bringing to me is, why don't we grow our own food? Why don't we grow food on our roofs on the building of a office building? And so I started to explore that a little bit and kind of find out that it's difficult. It's not impossible, but it's difficult because you've got an infrastructure that, you need a elevator to go up. You need support for the water and the dirt and all that kind of stuff. So I said, I don't think buildings are going to be the way to go. They said, well, let's put a pea patch out and we'll volunteer to take care of the lettuce and all that kind of stuff. I said, okay, well, let's try it. Well, the minute a weed came up, everybody had something else to do, right? So they were they were off in their own world, and so that didn't work. And as I go around, I try and get ideas from wherever I can. And I went to a flower show here in Seattle, and they were displaying one of these it was a grow tower, right? And they were growing lettuce on this grow tower hydroponically. And I thought, oh, this is the holy grail, right? And so we bought a bunch of them and put them into our cafes and started to, and they were all lit up, with these lights and stuff. And the data scientists and all the engineers came in and said, oh my God, this is something, we got to do something. They're taking selfies with it and doing all this kind of stuff, right? But what they did was they digitized it, right? So what we started to do is monitor the water and the pH and all the nutrients that were in the water and the lights and the humidity and all this kind of. So we started to pull data in from these machines. And then we started to understand the growth. So we put cameras on them when we watched lettuce grow. You sit back at midnight and watch lettuce grow. That's kind of fun. But anyway, so we really started to expand this to a point where we put these towers. Well, the interesting thing is these towers is a square meter of space, right? And so I thought, let's put them in the office space. Let's not put them in the cafe. Let's put them in the office space, because there's a square meter of space pretty much anywhere on anywhere. Sure. And you put these on there, and you think about it. There's how many floors, are there in the buildings at Microsoft, and then how many floors are there in the buildings in Seattle or in San Francisco, or all of a sudden your farm gets really big. Yeah. And it's all grown indoors with a water source that's 90%, better than farming on the land. And, all these things kind of start to fit. So we pursued it a little bit and started again to connect these to the cloud. So I had them in Beijing, I had them in Tel Aviv, I had them in Sydney, I had them in Redmond here. And I was monitoring this farm from a Surface tablet, right? So I knew what every tower was doing, and it was telling me how things were going and how they were, monitoring. And so what I thought, we could take this to grand scales and be able to feed people where the food is consumed and reduce completely the carbon footprint of it all, right? And so those are the kinds of things that we were playing with. It was, the financial model, of course, didn't work out like it's supposed to, but you got to start somewhere. And so we were doing prototypes with stuff like that. We had growing machines that planted. We had these areas where they were planting, and they were taking care of the plants as they were going along, and all this kind of stuff that we were just playing with. But as you know, and again, this was back in 2015 when I started to see what was going on at that World Expo. Between now and then and now, in just what is this 6 or 7 years, it's like, okay, wow, look where the industry has gone, and look what's going on. I mean, microgreens is another thing, right? We bought these cabinets, went to a food show in Chicago, and saw these cabinets that grow microgreens, right? And so it's like, okay, let's try this, let's put them in. We took it to a point where we had one of our cafes that had it had no lettuce on the salad bar. It was completely microgreens, and we would build these concoctions of microgreens that that would taste like whatever you wanted it to taste like. I mean, again, you talk about the Netherlands. I went to a place called Kloppert Cress over in just outside of Amsterdam, and this guy is growing microgreens that taste like stuff, right? So he handed me these little leaves, and they taste like popcorn, or they taste like, shrimp, or they taste like oysters, or whatever it is. Right. He had a little cafe there, and he didn't have salt and pepper on the table. He had microgreens that tasted like salt and tasted like pepper, right? I mean, it's just amazing what you can do with microgreens. So again, we connected them all to the cloud, and we started monitoring it, the humidity, the right? So right. It was just crazy what went on.
I love it. Look, ag technology is a really neat thing, and it's something we're going to have to really start to embrace. And I think one of the big things that's happening, at least in my opinion, is that some folks take a look at technology as an and or thing, and I think it's really an and thing, because it needs to be in conjunction with what's going on, because what they're doing is going to help here, and what's going on here is going to help there. It's how we're going to get the ball down the field. And to your point earlier, look, these people that are going to come to this, these people are coming to this planet, whether, they're here or, I'm a big believer they're coming on the spaceships too. Let's not make sure we understand those guys are coming, right?
Don't take me there. Don't take me there.
But nonetheless, it's real. And we can't run from technology, because it not only, it makes us look ignorant when we do, because it's going to make a big change. And I want to, if I can, I want to just shift and go back to something that you brought up earlier that I want to touch on a little bit more detail, which you talked about food waste. And I know that you are really, really bang that drum about food waste. And I know that, and I agree wholeheartedly with your position that packaging is a part of food waste that needs to be considered overall. And I'd love for you to talk about your successes when it comes to food waste, because I think this is something that people need to lean into. And I think that you've done such a great job of embracing it and bringing that packaging part into the equation. If you would, can you share a little bit about that? Because I don't want that to go without being addressed.
Yeah. Food waste is a big deal. It's, to me, it's so big that it gets really complicated, and you don't really know where to start.
100%.
Like I talked about, with the predictive analytics, that was one approach that we used. But again, as I kept my eyes open, all along the supply chain, there's food waste. And from the ground, clear to the store or the table or the plate, if you will. And so I started to explore that a little bit. And like I said earlier, we took our chefs out to farms and filmed them with potatoes and salmon and whatever else. And as we did that, I started to really look at food waste along the supply chain. One of the things, we went to an apple orchard, and there's beautiful apples up on the trees, but there's all these apples on the ground. Right. And I said, what, I asked the farmer rancher, what are you doing with those? He said, I can't touch them because of food safety. The government puts these restrictions on me that I can't, once it hits the ground, I can't do anything with it. I said, wow, what a waste, right? So that's why I say it gets really complicated, because there's this antiquated system that's set up to the way it was instead of the way it is. And so to me, we've got to kind of jump into understanding that, and again, all the way along the supply chain to understand waste. I think it was on the news this morning, they said that 15% of the food you buy at a grocery store ends up in the garbage or in the recycle, right? Because
Right.
you never use it. Even the humans go into a grocery store and great, I'll eat 20 apples. Well, you only eat 5, and then the rest of them go bad. So it's a big problem. And again, I think, to me, we've got to tap into it where we think we can make a difference, and then showcase it to the world so that everybody understands that they can make a difference. And
For sure.
and to me, again, it's a lot of those little things that come together to make a big thing, right? And so that's my thinking on it. And again, as far as specifics, I mean, to me, durables as opposed to recyclable or compostables is the better way to go. We used to fight China because you had to wash it, and there was some, the chemicals that were going into the ground because you were washing it and that sort of thing. But the chemical companies are starting to get that figured out, and so now it makes sense to do durables and to go that direction. But to me, again, as you get in deeper and deeper and deeper of this stuff, you got to make sure you understand what's going on when that plate's being made. How much energy is it causing, and how much waste is in the manufacturing process. And so, like I said, it's a big issue, right? But again, I think you take off little bites. It's not, like you said, it's not like boiling the ocean, right? We just take off these little cups of water and figure it out, and then all of a sudden things start to happen, and you really start to dig into it. And I've been involved in it since, like I said, since probably before the Milan Expo. But there's a lot of smart people working on this stuff, right? I mean, and the car manufacturers, if you will, the Teslas of the world, they're starting to get it figured out. But still, it's not perfect. It's not perfect, but people are concerned. And it's, like I said, this new generation that's coming up is really concerned about it. And so as a food provider to them, we've got to be very, very concerned about it. And we are.
Sure.
It's not like we're just doing it for them. It's the right thing to do, right?
Well, and you're measuring it, right? You're using your data to better understand it.
That's right.
I mean, you've got a pretty good track record with that. And I mean, I know you have in the past. I know you did some great work with it at Microsoft and whatnot. And I know that it's a big part of it. Because we're going to have to get more conscious about it.
Yeah, we were pretty much zero waste to landfill at Microsoft. I think we got a couple of awards and whatnot. And then same thing when I stepped into Ford, they were doing all kinds of things with zero waste and the process of making vehicles, right? They were on a big water conservation kind of a thing, and it takes a lot of water to build a truck. And so they were working on they have some goals out there to be able to build a truck not using any water, right? And so that's those are the kinds of goals that I think are definitely out there. And you're right, data's playing a role in it all because we're tracking it, but it's complicated. Like I said, with the supply chain and understanding carbon footprint along the way. I mean, the things that I was dealing with, or the things that I was thinking about at Microsoft was, and also part of the food transparency was blockchain tracking, if you will. But blockchain tracking is, if you put a QR code on a potato and you track it all the way through, maybe it's relatively solid as to what the carbon footprint is on that.
Right.
But to me, and again, these smart people get this figured out. If you went down to the cell level of that potato and you followed the cell clear till the time the human eats it, now you've got a true, supply chain transparency and really understanding that, right? And I think we're going to get there. So then when I put a number up on my screen that says the carbon footprint on this potato is X, you're going to know that is the truth, and that's not just some human's estimation about what the carbon footprint might be, right? Instead of it really is. So again, those are the kinds of things that from a data perspective I think we're going to get to. And like I said, there's some really smart people working on that kind of stuff.
Well, and they need to be, and I'm glad to see it, right? Because I think it is a big issue. You take a look, an emerging technology especially in the produce sector. We've got companies like Hazel that are out there trying to reduce food waste. There's other companies that are out doing different stuff. So I think it's really important that we keep leaning into this. And I say this all the time, we need to be talking about positive costs of food, and reducing food waste and figuring out how to do it, I believe, is a positive cost of food, right? Yeah. Packaging waste is figuring out, is a positive cost of food. Now, granted, it may cost us something to figure it out, but if we don't invest in it, the backside return is terrible, right? We're not moving forward. We're moving backwards. And sometimes I think we have a tendency to not worry about moving backwards because we're worried about the money going forward. And that's deadly when it comes to our health, and it's deadly when it comes to our food supply, and it's deadly when it comes to our planet.
Yep. And again, the more people we can get to start thinking like that, the better off we're going to be, right? I mean, to me, there's so many costs in food that don't get, noticed or charged to the customer, and they don't get it, right? And so, I think the louder we can be about that, the better off we're going to be.
Well, 100%. And, take a look at the data that's out from the USDA. They, and I'm probably need to get fact checked, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to be right, is that of every dollar that comes, that every dollar that passes through the farm system, 9 cents goes back to the farmer. Yeah. So that's a really interesting equation about positive cost of food. Where is it? Why is it? Et cetera. Just shift gears a little bit and just ask, kind of on a global scale, what do you see out there? I mean, I know we've talked about a whole myriad of different subjects and stuff, but what do you see that's working well globally, for institutions and corporate dining, outside of your scheme? What do you see something out there that's like, wow, I really think this is really cool. Is there something out there that's kind of struck your fancy lately?
Well,
and you could say no. It's kind of a crazy question. I don't care. You're not going to hurt my feelings.
But it is a crazy question, and I truly haven't thought about it much. But there is some cool stuff going on out there, and I mean, and it's interesting because it in my mind anyway, it's been caused by this pandemic. It's caused people to think differently because they have to.
Right.
When the pandemic hit. I was at Ford, and an 117-year-old engineering company doesn't move fast. Decision making takes a long time. And when COVID hit, everything in a day or within hours shut down. They never heard of anything like that. And it was like this panic that hit them. It's like, oh my God, what are we going to do? Right. Within 2 days, we had shifted a car or truck manufacturing plant into a ventilator manufacturing plant. And from a food perspective, we shifted our whole program to be able to produce free lunches for the workers that were building these ventilators, right?
Right.
That was a realization that they could make decisions faster, right, than they had in the past. And so I think it's those kinds of realizations that are starting to pop up, and that we can do things different now. Even this Zoom meeting that we're on, right? I mean, who would have thunk that we would be doing this all the time?
Right.
And, back before COVID, it was maybe some little, interesting person would throw this up and somebody would say, yeah, let's do it, kind of thing or whatever. But now it's become a norm, right? So to me, the pandemic has caused us to kind of relook at a lot of different things and how we do that. And so I see that happening in the, in the corporate food world. I mean, and understanding, how we feed people, how we can feed people sustainably, how we can meet their needs, both in the office and away from the office, right? And how does that mix work, and how does that whole thing kind of fit together? Some companies, not LinkedIn or Ford or Microsoft, started to really, they were looking at sending things home to their employees,
Right.
And again, one of the ideas that I thought about, again, I was working at Ford. It's a vehicle company. I thought, well, why don't they were looking at autonomous vehicles and electric vehicles and all that. And I said, so why don't we put these meals in autonomous vehicles, and so then they can go all over the city sending food to our employees at their homes, right? And showcase the product, but also fill a need that was at the time, right? And so that, I mean, it never gained legs, but it was still one of those things that started to kind of shift in my head. And so, I don't know if there's, I'm trying to think of any real monumental things, but I guess overall the industry has really learned that the norm isn't necessarily the norm anymore. And,
Right.
Okay, so now we got a clean slate. What are we going to do? What are we going to build? How are we going to build it? What are we going to, and so that to me is, as a dreamer, that's great. I love that
I love
stuff.
it. No, I
Yeah.
agree with you. I agree 100%. Thank you for answering the question. I was a little bit of an oddball one, but I thought based upon where we were at, it's like, well, what the hell? I'm going to throw it on the table. Tell me really quick, and I know we touched on a little bit, on crickets and bug larvae, some of these other things from an alternative food source. And I want to just go back to it really quick. What do you think of this whole plant-based thing going on right now?
It's the future. It's the future. That's what our customers are demanding right now. And again, I think a lot of it has to do with the planet, right? I mean, and again, I talked about it, from a water standpoint. But yeah, I see it happening. It's going in crazy different ways. I guess I have mixed emotions about some of the plant-based products that are coming out. I'm not sure exactly what else besides pea protein is in them. And so I wonder what that effect's going to have on the body. I live with a vegetarian, and she says, are you trying to build a carrot into a burger and make it taste like a burger? Because I don't want burgers, right? Why not just cook me the carrot? And so I think maybe these are going to play out. There's going to be a mass market, like like Burger King, I think, has Impossible Burger or whatever.
Right.
So it's playing to the masses, but that also to me has a purpose as well, because those people who were eating beef in the past are now going to be eating plant-based things, and I think generally that's probably the right way to go. I think it's going to be a healthier method, if you will.
Right.
Now, the cattle ranchers and the bison ranchers are not going to be happy with me on that one, but
again, Buffy and Lola might be cool with it. They're going to chill out and keep making babies. They're probably going, shit, this is a win-win for us.
Yeah, it's a good win-win, that's for sure. But anyway, but I think it's moderation, right? It's
right.
Not everything plant-based and everything meat-based. It's this, working it into a moderation kind of a thing that's going to be the thing of the future. And you go on ebbs and flows. So plant-based is really popular right now, and so everybody's going there. And like I say, I keep track of the college universities, and I'm telling you, it's driving everything that they do in the world. So.
No, you're right. And I think it's going to be interesting to see. I think, when you look at some of the different things that are out there right now, your point's valid about what are the health ramifications. When you take a look at some of the ways some of this is made, you look at the carbon footprint of some of this, it's a little bit sometimes off-putting. And I think but again, you got to start somewhere to get somewhere. And so hopefully that refines itself in some way. I don't necessarily know I'm a big fan of some of the cell cultured meat that they're working on that. I'm just having a hard time getting my head wrapped around that.
Yeah. I really have mixed feelings about it, right? The thought of it is that, it's real beef. It's just a cell from a cow's ear or something, but, and so from a planet perspective, it probably has some benefit. I'm just not sure growing it in a petri dish is, from a concept standpoint is the right thing, but this is where things are going, right?
But hey, I tried crickets. I've done a scorpion. I've tried some different weird stuff. So I mean, I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. But you're right. It's just sort of like, well, maybe. I don't know. We'll see.
More education, just understanding.
Well, 100%. Just a fast quick. What's the largest number of meals you think you've served in one singular day?
Well. That's an interesting question. When I said, I worked at Hewlett Packard and I fed Hewlett Packard, and every year they had a company picnic, and they had 10,000 people come to this company picnic. And I had never in my mind at that point in my career ever thought about feeding 10,000 people.
10,000 people
at one time. And it was side story. It was really interesting because HP is an engineering company.
Right.
The engineers were responsible for the steaks that we put out. And so they had these big pits that they were doing, and they put charcoal in them, and they knew the exact BTUs of heat that were coming up, and they knew exactly when to, strike the fire and all that. And I, being in the food industry, is like, they were not lighting the fire. They're not lighting the fire. And then, I said, hey, we got 10,000 people coming up. Right. So they said, no, we got this under control. Right. And boom, they knew it. They got their stopwatch out, and they said, now. And they fired all those things, and the steaks came out perfect, and everybody got fed, and it was like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. But anyway,
it's awesome.
So that was at that time, it was 10,000 people, at Microsoft. There's, I don't know, 40,000 people on the campus here in Redmond. And,
right.
So we're serving, I don't know, 35,000 meals a day.
Yeah, easy.
So, it's all relative, I guess. And I suppose I don't even know. I mean, I've never been to bigger events, I guess, than the 35.
Sure. Right.
Right. So I guess on a daily basis, that's what I was serving. And
I love it.
Just keeping track of what was going on there. I mean, it works out to, I don't know, 10 million meals a year. So it's just the numbers really add up when you have this amount of volume.
Oh, for sure. Well, who's your most severe critic? You, your family, or your coworkers of your cooking?
Yeah, I think it's me. Like I said,
for sure.
I'm always interested in it, and I don't get too hung up on all the awards and all that kind of stuff that go along with it. It's more about, okay, what are we going to do next? What's important? Right. What do my customers want? What do they? So yeah, I think I'm probably the most critical of anything, and I guess.
Which is good. What's your go-to recipe? If you're cooking, if Mark, it's Saturday afternoon and Mark's getting fired up, and what's your go-to? I mean, because is it toast? I mean, you got to be. I mean, you can boil water. I know you can do that.
So, well, like I said, I live with a vegetarian, and so we're cooking. I don't know what I call real meals, right? I mean, it's potatoes, it's carrots, it's and I throw in a piece of chicken every now and then, which she kind of cringes at, but that's it's not a, I don't know, it's not a big sushi. I mean, I've eaten in a lot of Michelin star restaurants. So I've eaten in a lot of Burger Kings or whatever, right? But home cooked meals are always the best because you get them the way you want.
100%, 100% agree.
There is really no recipe. You're just kind of throwing stuff in, right?
That's some of the best food is when you wing it. All right, let's have a little bit of fun. Let's get people to know you a little bit. Play a little trivia with you right now, a little TLC. You're playing for big cash and prizes too.
Okay.
No, you're not. You're not. You're not at all. So what do you want me to lie?
I'm done.
What do you want me to lie to you? All right. Who's your favorite band?
Oh man, I'm a Beatles fan all the way.
I love it. Great place to start.
Yeah.
So if you could trade living as someone for just one day, who would you swap with?
Jane Goodall. I
got to tell you, I know, no BS. That is the second answer to that question that I've gotten in the history of our Todd-versations. That is a popular choice. She's an amazing individual.
She did a talk at Microsoft, and I got to go to the green room with her, and struck up. I got to spend a half an hour with her, and she's phenomenal. She is absolutely phenomenal, and I ended up getting her personal email address, so we stayed sort of in connection. But yeah, she's way out there, phenomenal.
I would have her on my bucket list of people I could sit down and hang out with for 30 minutes and chat with. There's no two ways about it. So are you a charcoal or a gas guy on the barbecue?
Well, I don't barbecue, so either one of them puts carbon into the atmosphere. So I'm more electric, I guess.
There you go. It's a fair, good answer. What's your favorite carbo? What's your favorite carbohydrate?
I guess bread.
Can't go wrong with good bread. Can't go wrong. So all your world travels, what's your favorite city?
Yeah, you know, I answer this in an interesting way. I've traveled all over the world, and I have really two favorite places. One is Seattle. I keep coming home and saying, this is the best place on the planet. We've got trees, we got green, we got water, we got weather that clears the air. I love Seattle, right? So that's my favorite spot, and that's why I'm here. I also spent some time in the Swiss Alps, and I'm telling you, they're doing some really cool stuff there, and I like the way that it's, you know, it's situated, and I love the scenery and that sort of thing. So, you know, I don't know, Geneva maybe, I guess, would be
those are great answers. You know, I am super appreciative of you taking the time to hang out today a little bit and to share, because I think your words are extremely impactful, and I think that what you're doing and what you're talking about, and you know, you're raising the bar out there, whether you want to believe it or not. You're raising the bar, and this conversation is going to raise the bar, because I think this conversation is going to resonate with a lot of people that are going to look at their own businesses and the own things that they're doing, and whether it's a retailer or a grower, whatever it might be, or a food manufacturer, and take a moment of pause and reflect a little bit upon what you've shared. And I appreciate your transparency and your openness and your willingness to, you know, to pull the curtain back a little bit and share about your career, because it's incredibly impressive. So thank you for that. And I have, you know, one final question I want to throw at you. You know, you've had the good fortune of seeing the world and seeing the food world that's out there, you know, on a global scale. And it's very apparent that it has impacted you. So if you could change just one thing in the food world today, what would it be?
Well, you know, we've been talking about it pretty much this whole time, and it has to do with food waste. I mean, I'm just got this driving passion to, you know, and again, I think I picked it up in Milan when we were talking about feeding the planet
Right.
in 2050, and there's enough food on the planet to feed the people if we don't waste it, right? And if you can grow it where it's consumed, there's enough food. And so let's focus in on that, because
Right.
it just drives me crazy when you hear about people not having enough food to eat, because there's enough food on the planet. So I mean, that's where I'm at.
I love it. That's a great answer. And I agree with you 110%. We have to put the energy in to recognize that figuring out food waste is a positive cost of food.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for your openness and sharing, and it's been fantastic. I've learned a ton. You've made me stop, pause, and think a little bit. Good. And you know, guys like us that have a little bit of gray hair, that's a good thing when we stop, pause, and think a little bit. Oh yeah, no, we're there, baby. We're there. We've earned these. Remember, these we've earned. That's right. You know, so I always say some of these are self-inflicted, and some of these I've learned from. Right. Yeah. So, yeah. I appreciate you, Mark, very, very much for stopping by and hanging out with us. It's been fantastic. And thanks everybody for being here. We appreciate you listening. Cool. Thanks, Mark. Okay. I really appreciate it. And I'm coming up for wine and crickets.
Okay, let's do it.
Done. Thanks, everybody.
Bye now.
Huge shout out to Mark for hanging out with us and sharing his journey, his adventure, and his path. I hope you enjoyed that. He's an incredible guy doing some incredible things. And he brought up some tough subjects. He brought up some things for cause a moment of pause and reflection, but to recognize that in order to get to the end game, we're going to have to work hard to get there. So thank you all for hanging out with us. We really do appreciate your support and your reviews and your liking and the comments and the emails. They mean a lot to us. Don't forget to check us out on all our social media sites, TLC_Todd-versations, LinkedIn. Hey, look, we're on LinkedIn. What the hell? Facebook, all that fun stuff. Remember, the audio version is available on every podcast site that it could possibly be on. You know, rate, review, and subscribe. We really want to keep this thing going. We love these conversations because I think they're important and they're impactful. So your support makes that happen. So thanks everybody for being here. We really do appreciate it. Thanks to our sponsors for helping us out and getting this ball down the field. Much love to you as well. Take care, everybody. Remember, go inspire somebody today. It's super important. Thanks, everybody. Be good. Talk soon.